Angels have wings. Walk into any church, open any children's Bible, scroll through any Christian art account online, and you will see the same image repeated endlessly. A glowing human figure with two large feathery wings spreading out from their back. It's one of the most universally accepted images in all of Christianity. It's also almost entirely made up. The vast majority of angels who appear in the Bible show up looking like ordinary men, and wings are never mentioned. In Genesis 18, 3 visitors arrive at Abraham's tent, sit down, and eat a meal with him. No wings. In Genesis 19, 2 of those same visitors walk into Sodom, get invited to dinner, and are described simply as men throughout the entire account. The winged beings that do appear in Scripture, the seraphim of Isaiah 6 with 6 wings each, and the cherubim of Ezekiel 1 with 4 wings each, are not the standard angels most Christians picture. They are described as entirely different categories of creature, and even they bear almost no resemblance to the serene winged humans painted across cathedral ceilings. The feathered angel look was largely inherited from Greco-Roman art and fused with Christian imagery around the 4th century AD, after Constantine, when artists began needing visual shorthand to distinguish divine figures from ordinary humans. Scripture gave them no wings to work with, so they borrowed the imagery from elsewhere. What the Bible actually gives you is far stranger and far more interesting than anything hanging in the Louvre. Angels look like glowing, beautiful humans. If a glowing, gentle, beautiful figure appeared in front of you, your first instinct probably would not be to collapse face first onto the ground in absolute terror. But that is exactly what happens every single time a human being encounters an angel in the Bible. There is a reason that almost every angelic appearance in Scripture opens with the words, "Do not be afraid." And it is not because the angel looks like a friendly neighbor. When the angel appears to the shepherds in Luke 2, the text says, "The glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified." When Daniel encounters the figure in Daniel 10, described as having a face like lightning and arms like burnished bronze, every single man with him flees in panic without even seeing it, and Daniel himself is left lying on the ground with no strength remaining. The cherubim of Ezekiel 1 have 4 faces each, a human face, a lion's face, an ox's face, and an eagle's face, 4 wings, legs like calves, and travel alongside spinning wheels covered entirely in eyes. In Revelation 10, a single angel is so enormous that it plants 1 foot on the sea and 1 foot on the land, and its voice is described as the roar of a lion. The gentle, softly glowing, reassuringly beautiful figure in the flowing robe is a product of Renaissance painting, not of anything a biblical writer ever put to words. Everyone gets a guardian angel. The idea that every person alive has one specific angel personally assigned to them, watching every move and guarding them through every moment of life, is one of the most comforting beliefs in popular Christianity. It is also one of the least supported by the actual text. The closest Scripture comes is Matthew 18:10, where Jesus refers to little children and says, "Their angels in heaven always see the face of my Father." It's a striking line, but it says nothing about one-to-one assignment or lifelong personal guardianship. Psalm 91:11 says God will command his angels to guard the believer, using the plural, suggesting a collective protective role rather than a single designated guardian. Hebrews 1:14 describes angels broadly as ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. Again, a collective description of function, not individual appointment. The detailed theology of a personal guardian angel assigned at birth was developed primarily by early church fathers, including Origen and Basil of Caesarea, and later formalized in Catholic tradition rather than derived directly from Scripture. The Catholic Catechism paragraph 336 does affirm guardian angels, but that is a doctrinal development built on inference and tradition, not a verse that plainly states every human being has one. The belief is ancient and sincere. It is just not quite as biblically airtight as most people assume. Angels are dead people, and humans become angels. Somewhere in the cultural background, radiation of Western Christianity, the idea quietly took hold that when good people die, they become angels, earn their wings, and float off to watch over the living. It shows up in sympathy cards, in eulogies, in movies, and in the deeply felt comfort people offer at funerals. It has almost no basis in Christian scripture, and in several places the Bible directly contradicts it. Angels are consistently presented as an entirely separate category of created being from humanity, not an upgraded form of it. 1 Corinthians 6:3 states that believers will one day judge angels, which implies humans occupy a position above angels in the final order, not that they join the angelic ranks. Hebrews 1:5 draws a sharp distinction between Christ and the angels by pointing to the Father-Son relationship, a relationship extended to redeemed humans, but never to angels. In Revelation 5:11-12, the redeemed humans and the angels are depicted as two distinct groups simultaneously surrounding the throne, clearly separate categories of being. The "you just got your wings" narrative is largely traceable to popular culture, most famously the 1946 film It's a Wonderful Life, not to any theological tradition with genuine scriptural backing. The afterlife Christianity actually describes for humans is resurrection into glorified bodily existence, not transformation into a different species of being entirely. Angels are female or always gentle and soft. The standard image of an angel, soft features, flowing pale robes, a calm and tender expression, is so thoroughly feminine in its presentation that many people have absorbed the assumption that angels are female, or at least gentle, in the way that word is usually gendered. Scripture goes in a completely different direction. Every named angel in the Bible carries a masculine name: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael. Every angelic figure who appears in person is described as a man or appears in masculine form, and the behavior of these figures is not gentle in any soft sense of the word. In 2 Kings 19:35, a single angel moves through the Assyrian camp, and by morning 185,000 soldiers are dead. One angel, one night, 185,000 people. Revelation 12:7 describes Michael leading armies of angels into open war in heaven. Daniel 12:1 calls Michael the Great Prince in explicitly military language. The tender, docile, decorative angel of Victorian greeting cards and Renaissance altarpieces is an artistic construction that accumulated over centuries, drawing on cultural associations between femininity, purity, and the divine. The actual biblical messenger is closer to a special forces operative than to the figure hovering over sleeping children in a nursery print. Angels are omniscient and know everything. It is easy to assume that beings who live in the presence of God and carry out divine missions would have access to divine knowledge. Christianity generally does not teach that, and Scripture is surprisingly clear on the point. In Matthew 24:36, Jesus explicitly states that no one knows the day or hour of his return, and he lists specifically, not the angels, not even the Son, only the Father. Angels are created beings with real limitations on what they know. 1 Peter 1:12 says the prophets were serving future generations when they wrote about salvation, and then adds that these are things that angels long to look into, a phrase that only makes sense if the angels do not fully understand them yet. Luke 15:10 describes angels rejoicing when a sinner repents, which implies they receive that information as news rather than knowing it in advance. According to the theology developed by Thomas Aquinas in the Summa Theologica, angels have vast intellect but finite knowledge, learning and receiving information rather than possessing it eternally and completely. Omniscience in Christian theology belongs exclusively to God, Attributing it to angels, even as an informal assumption, quietly elevates them to a level that no biblical writer ever assigned to them. Lucifer is the biblical name for Satan. Ask most Christians what Satan's real name is, and a significant portion will say Lucifer, stated with full confidence, as if it is a fact as settled as the number of disciples. It is not. The word Lucifer appears exactly once in the entire King James Bible, in Isaiah 14:12, and it is not even a Hebrew word. It is a Latin word meaning light-bearer, used by Jerome in the 4th century Vulgate translation to render the Hebrew word Hallel, which means shining one or son of the dawn. The chapter it appears in is explicitly framed as a taunt directed at the king of Babylon, a human ruler. Many biblical scholars argue the passage refers entirely to that king and his downfall, not to Satan at all. The Latin word Lucifer was also used in ancient texts simply to describe Venus, the morning star, because the planet appears bright before sunrise. Modern translations, including the NIV and ESV, have removed the word entirely, replacing it with morning star or shining one, precisely because the translators recognized it was never functioning as a proper name. The Satan as Lucifer identification developed through early Christian theological interpretation, most influentially through figures like Origen and Tertullian, and later through works like Dante's Inferno and Milton's Paradise Lost, which cemented it in popular imagination. The personal name Lucifer for Satan is a later theological construction, not a label the Bible itself ever applies. Angels constantly sing hymns and play harps. The picture is familiar. Row upon row of angels in white robes, each holding a golden harp, filling heaven with music for eternity. It is one of the most enduring images of the afterlife in Western culture. It is also a significant misreading of the biblical text. Angels in Scripture are almost never described playing harps, and the famous Christmas scene most people imagine is not quite what Luke 2 actually says. The text says, "A multitude of the heavenly host appeared and praised God," but it does not say they sang, and it gives no music, no melody, no lyrics. The word sang does not appear. In Revelation 5:8-9, the figures holding harps and singing a new song are the elders, widely understood as representing redeemed humanity, not the angels. The angels join in with voice in verse 11-12, but they are not the ones with harps. Revelation 15:2 similarly shows harp players who are those who had been victorious. Again, human figures rather than angelic ones. Job 38:7 describes the morning stars singing at creation, but this is widely understood as poetic language. In their actual described activities, biblical angels spend most of their time delivering messages, executing judgment, and going to war. The harp-playing, singing eternal choir is a combination of legitimate scripture about redeemed humans and centuries of artistic imagination freely applied to angels instead. The hierarchy of angels is directly from the Bible. Most Christians who know the word seraphim, or who can name the 9 choirs of angels including thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, and the rest, tend to assume this structure was laid out clearly in Scripture. It was not. The famous 9-tier hierarchy of angels was systematized by a writer known as Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, writing around 500 AD in a text called The Celestial Hierarchy. This was not a biblical author. It was a Greek Christian philosopher drawing heavily on Neoplatonic thought, and his framework was adopted and elaborated by medieval theologians, including Thomas Aquinas. Scripture does mention several categories: seraphim in Isaiah, cherubim throughout the Old Testament, archangels twice in the entire New Testament, and passing references to powers, thrones, dominions, and principalities in Paul's letters, particularly Colossians 1:16. But Paul never ranks them, never assigns them roles in a hierarchy, and never suggests a 9-tier organizational chart. The word archangel appears only in 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and Jude 1:9, and Michael is the only being in canonical scripture ever given that title. Gabriel, universally called an archangel in popular Christianity, is never assigned that designation in the Bible. The elaborate ranked structure that Christians treat as biblical is, at its foundation, 5th-century Greek Christian philosophy, dressed up in scriptural language. Satan and the fallen angels were expelled before creation. The story most Christians carry in their heads goes something like this. Satan rebelled, was cast out of heaven, and then, already fallen and already evil, went into the Garden of Eden to tempt Eve. It is a clean narrative. It is also largely a theological reconstruction that Scripture never actually presents in that sequence or with that clarity. The timing of Satan's expulsion from heaven is never explicitly stated in Scripture, and the texts usually cited to establish it are more ambiguous than they appear. Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, the two primary passages used to describe Satan's fall, are both directly addressed to human kings, the king of Babylon and the prince of Tyre respectively, and their application to Satan is an interpretive move, not an explicit statement. Revelation 12:7-9 describes war in heaven and Satan being cast down, but Revelation is apocalyptic literature, and scholars actively debate whether this describes a past, present, or future event. Most significantly, Job 1:6-7 shows Satan appearing before God in the heavenly court long after humanity already exists, walking the earth freely and reporting back. He is not depicted as a fully expelled exile, but as an active figure still moving between realms. The neat pre-creation fall, followed by the temptation of Eve, is a theological reconstruction assembled from scattered texts, not a timeline the Bible itself ever lays out. Angels would never harm anyone. The popular image of angels as gentle protectors, soft-voiced messengers who hover over sleeping children and guide the lost safely home, is one of the warmest ideas in folk Christianity. It is also directly contradicted by some of the most dramatic moments in the entire Bible. In 2 Kings 19:35, a single angel passes through the Assyrian camp during the night, and by morning 185,000 soldiers are dead. The text offers no elaborate description of the battle, no mention of weapons or struggle. One angel, one night, 185,000 dead. In Acts 12:23, an angel strikes Herod dead on the spot for accepting worship that belonged to God, and the text adds that he was eaten by worms. In Revelation 16, it is angels who pour out the 7 bowls of divine wrath, each one unleashing plagues of sores, seas turning to blood, rivers poisoned, and humans scorched with fire. In Genesis 19, the angels visiting Sodom strike the men of the city blind and then preside over the destruction of the entire region. The angels of Revelation 8 and 9 release the destroyer from the pit and signal each new wave of catastrophe. These are not soft figures. The consistent human response to encountering one, absolute terror requiring immediate reassurance, makes a great deal more sense when you actually read what they do in the text. Angels can be worshipped and prayed to. In certain streams of folk Christianity and in some more formal devotional traditions, angels are addressed in prayer, invoked for protection, and given a level of veneration that functions practically like worship. The Bible addresses this directly and in a notably blunt way. In Revelation 19:10, the Apostle John falls at an angel's feet to worship, and the angel's response is immediate. "Do not do it. I am a fellow servant. Worship God." What makes this passage particularly striking is that John makes the exact same mistake again in Revelation 22:8-9, falling at the feet of an angel in worship, and the angel stops him a second time with the same instruction. Paul warns explicitly in Colossians 2:18 against the worship of angels, describing it as a form of false spirituality that disqualifies believers from the prize. 1 Timothy 2:5 states, "There is one mediator between God and humanity, with no angelic intermediaries in the framework." Hebrews 1:6 places angels in the position of worshiping Christ, not receiving worship themselves. Catholic theology does draw a formal distinction between latria, the worship owed only to God, and dulia, the veneration that can be offered to saints and angels, and that distinction is a genuine and carefully developed theological position. But in every recorded encounter in Scripture, the behavior of the angels themselves is entirely consistent. They point away from themselves and toward God every single time, without exception. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.